Little Idaho history for you. Did you know that the television was actually invented here in the Gem State? A guy by the names of Philo Farnsworth. 1922, while at Rigby High School in eastern Idaho, Farnsworth drew electrical circuits on a blackboard. It was the beginning of television as we know it. 5 years later, in 1927, he transmitted the very first all-electronic TV picture, and he was awarded the very first patent for the television set. With all that said, television roots run deep here in the state of Idaho, and it got us thinking. As we celebrate our 70th anniversary this year, how does all of this actually get on air and to you at home?
On July 12, 1953, KIDO-TV, which later became KTVB, signed on for the very first time from our original studio on Crestline Drive. At that time, television was just starting to become popular, but most households didn't even have a television set, and the demand for TV news wasn't exactly around the clock. Local news ran for just 15 minutes a day. No live reports, no sports,
and the year 1965 will be history.
Just news and weather. And our reach wasn't great, because our transmitter was planted right next to our studio, near the military reserve in the Boise foothills, barely 3,000 feet in elevation.
It was a big mistake for us to put our transmitter at 700 Crestline Drive. When we turned on the switch in 1953, we barely reached Payette, Idaho.
Still waiting for approval, our competition learned from our mistake.
Channel 2 immediately, when we went there, they immediately modified their application to the FCC, and they moved up to the top of Bogus Basin, which we gradually had to do, to be competitive.
The view and broadcast capabilities from 7,500 feet was much better once we moved up to Bogus in the late 1950s. But we still weren't able to access national network. At the time, an expensive microwave signal. The solution meant joining forces.
We worked with Channel 2 and we developed a microwave system between Boise and Salt Lake City.
The starting point for the line-of-sight signal was the Crossroads of the West, which bounced into Albion, Idaho. From there to Twin Falls. From Twin Falls to Mountain Home, then up to Deer Point at Bogus Basin. And then finally, back down to Boise. It traveled at nearly the speed of light. That microwave signal allowed us to start airing live network shows.
And the first live telecast was a Friday night's fight.
The Gillette Cavalcade of Sports is on the air.
It wouldn't be until the late 1970s when KTVB brought live reports to Idaho.
We want to remind you that this is coming live from Gowan Field out at the airport.
President Jimmy Carter landed in Boise for a trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon River in August of 1978.
And there he goes, and Larry from the Boise airport. Sal Selesky reporting for Newsbeat 7.
That was the first live shot in Idaho history. Sal had arranged a microwave feed back to the station, and it made history.
It was a smaller version of the way the signal was sent out of Salt Lake City. At the Boise airport, Sal Selesky and a photographer put a microwave dish on top of their news van, pointing it directly toward our Deer Point transmitter, which then bounced that signal back down to the KTVB studio.
If you had line of sight to Deer Point, the top of, Bogus Basin, you could get a live shot done.
We've come a long way from the days of the Newsbeat 7 live van.
So today we can do microwave live shots, we can do satellite live shots, and we can do bonded cellular from anywhere in the country.
With a pack carried on backs. So that's how we get it to your house. But how about how we get news in-house? That has also evolved.
Everything we had on the air came from a 8mm, 16mm film. It was kinescope.
When I arrived here in '75, we were all shooting film. So you go out with your sound cameras and shoot your story, then you have to come back, put it in the film processor, which was always a gamble. Get it out of the processor and then physically edit, splice the film together. And if you wanted to cover a talking head with some video, you had to make a B-roll on a separate roll, which was on a different color chain in the control room.
It took probably 4 or 5 hours to process the film that had been shot the night before, which had to be done before it could be edited.
And then this was all assembled on the air live. When it came time for your story, they're running this film chain, they're running the B-roll, they're putting the super slide up, everything comes together live on the air, if you're lucky.
A film chain was basically a projector that projected the image onto a mirror, and there was a little camera that would see that image on a mirror and convert it to video. It would just record it.
With the introduction of videotape in the late 1970s, news gathering got quicker, but the equipment was still big and heavy.
The video cameras that we shot in the field with, though, were these big honking heavy things that made your shoulder hurt.
There's a lot of photographers who ended up leaving the business who were good photographers at the time who had pretty major shoulder damage because they were heavy, and then the tripods were heavy.
And then you had a big deck that recorded to 3/4-inch videotape.
It's come a long ways. I mean, just looking at these cameras now, those look so much smaller than what we had when we first went.
The fact that it had to all come together on the air live is what is interesting looking back on, because I mean, now you go into the editing booth and do your story and they just push a button when they need it.
These days, ingesting and editing video can take just minutes. News gathering tools that used to break backs can now be carried in your back pocket.
There are so many technological advances that if we name them all, it would take up the entire show. But one project we've ever undertaken back in 2009, a big one, we went from analog to digital, and engineers had to manually adjust all of our transmitter stations across the region, turning them from analog to digital. Very cool.